My name is Rachel Mercer, and for 15 years I was the quiet force behind Mercer Link Solutions, our family's logistics company based in Pittsburgh. 44, I had dedicated nearly half my life to that company, pouring my energy, intellect, and countless sleepless nights into building something extraordinary. Core wasn't just a system, it was the living infrastructure of our global operations. Tracked shipments across continents, automated billing for thousands of vendors, and adapted in real time to delays, demand surges, and inventory fluctuations. Core was my brainchild, my masterpiece. But none of that mattered when my younger brother Brandon, freshly minted from a startup accelerator in California, slid a termination letter across my desk like it was a lunch menu. "The company needs to evolve," he said with an oily kind of confidence that only someone new and naive could wear so casually. "We're moving to Vortex. It's sleeker, more modern, more scalable." He leaned back in Dad's old leather chair, a chair that still bore faint cracks from years of real leadership. His navy blazer was crisp, his Rolex just visible under a stiff cuff. I could almost hear the sales pitch he'd rehearsed in front of a mirror that morning. And I could see it written all over his face. He thought this was a power move. I didn't blink. My fingers gently touched the edge of the desk where I'd sat through data breaches, supply chain panics, and late-night outages. This desk had seen more loyalty and more quiet triumphs than Brandon ever would. And now it was the setting for my exit. I picked up the letter and skimmed it, not because I needed to read the words but because I wanted to give him a moment. A moment to notice that I wasn't crying, wasn't pleading, wasn't even flinching. I stood, slow and steady, and tucked the letter neatly into my bag. Brandon tilted his head, searching my expression for disappointment, outrage, maybe a tear. He found none. I turned and walked past the executive suite's glass walls, past the interns who suddenly became deeply interested in their keyboards, past the analysts who looked everywhere but at me. I made one last stop, Core's server room. It was dim, humming, and cold. A metal sanctuary. I had practically lived in that room for months when the system was in development. There was no instruction manual. Core had been built line by one person, me. Not out of arrogance, but because no one else wanted the job. And now, Brandon thought it could be replaced with an off-the-shelf solution that probably looked good on a pitch deck. I packed in minutes. A coffee mug from my first coding conference, a small framed picture of Max, my golden retriever and loyal companion, and a notebook with curling pages, filled with design sketches, formulas, and ideas. That notebook was older than Vortex itself. As I zipped my laptop into its bag, a calm smile touched my lips. Not because I was vengeful, but because I knew something Brandon didn't. Core wasn't just a tool. It was an ecosystem. And it wasn't going to welcome outsiders who treated it like an old operating system to be deleted. I left without a word. No dramatic exit. No final monologue. Just the soft click of the door closing behind me and the echo of my heels in the hallway. Sighed, the late autumn air stung my cheeks. I looked up once at the Mercer Link building. A place that had once felt like mine. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel grief. I felt free. Growing up, I was the silent sibling. While Brandon dazzled the neighbors and lit up holiday dinners with jokes and charm, I stayed busy with wires, batteries, and keyboards. I once reprogrammed our washing machine to send me a text when the cycle finished, at age 11. I wasn't looking for applause. I liked the quiet logic of it all. Our father, Edward Mercer, used to brag that Brandon could charm the rust off a nail. He was right. Brandon had always been the talker. The smiler. The one who turned up the volume when clients came around. And me? I was the girl in the hoodie with 3 monitors and a Red Bull stash. I didn't sparkle. I delivered results. 16, I built an inventory tracking app as a side project. By 20, I was managing digital logistics pipelines for 3 small distributors Dad was mentoring. When Mercer Link started expanding, Dad gave me a shot to build something scalable. Core was born in the quiet margins of those early days, One schema, one function, one failsafe at a time. I think Dad appreciated me back then. When I showed him my code or rolled out a fix that saved the company thousands overnight, he'd squeeze my shoulder and call me his secret weapon. But when it came time to name a successor, he didn't choose me. "You're brilliant, Rachel," he said over coffee one morning. "But the face of the company needs to be someone who can work a room. That's your brother's strength." I nodded. What else could I do? I kept my disappointment tucked behind my keyboard and returned to the only place where my value wasn't in question, the code. When Dad retired, Brandon stepped in with shiny new ideas and a hunger for disruption. First, I held out hope. Maybe he'd ask questions. Maybe he'd respect what was already built. But instead, he came in swinging, with a top-down plan to replace Core with a new third-party platform called Vortex. His reason? Better visuals, better investor confidence, faster integrations. He never asked how the integrations worked. He never learned what made Core tick. The first few days after being fired felt strangely calm. I ran along the river trails at dawn, ate eggs and toast at a table instead of at my desk, brushed Max's fur without glancing at Slack notifications. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. I updated my resume and started mapping out a consulting firm. Something agile. Something smart. I even dreamed of a mentorship platform for women in tech. For once, the world felt open. Then my phone rang. It was Caitlin from IT. Her voice trembled. "Rachel, something's wrong. Core crashed." During Brandon's live investor pitch. I straightened in my seat. "What do you mean crashed?" Everything froze. Right on the screen. Shipment logs stopped. Billing reports turned into errors. He kept clicking like it was the mouse's fault. We couldn't log in. Covery failed. "Rachel, they're blaming me." I didn't speak right away. Not because I was shocked, but because I'd expected this would happen. I just hadn't thought it would be this soon. She kept talking. He installed Vortex over it, skipped the shutdown protocols, overwrote the launch files. He didn't even back up the existing scripts. I closed my eyes. My system wasn't failing. It was defending itself. Core had been programmed with internal checkpoints, silent flags that resisted unsafe changes. Like antibodies. Not to sabotage, but to protect integrity. And now it was doing exactly what I designed it to do. Not crash. Defend. And Brandon? He had just triggered a war he didn't even know he was fighting. I didn't feel satisfied. Not yet. There was no vindication, no victorious grin. Just a steady, simmering sense of inevitability. When you build something with soul, something layered with intention and years of resilience, you don't just watch someone gut it for flash and walk away untouched. They don't just break code when they do that. They break trust. And trust, once shattered, tends to collapse loudly. I watched it unfold on my laptop, balanced on the kitchen counter, my coffee still steaming beside it. The live stream had started with Brandon in his element, confident, polished, armed with buzzwords. He welcomed the investors with a grin, promising a demonstration of Vortex, the shiny new system that would revolutionize operations. But the moment he tried to override Core, the presentation unraveled. I knew the second the dashboard froze what had triggered it. Years ago, I'd embedded a security protocol deep within Core's architecture. It wasn't sabotage. It was safety. A safeguard against unauthorized tampering, designed to lock the system down if critical sequences were altered by anyone lacking clearance. Core didn't scream. It didn't warn. Simply shut the door and waited for someone who knew how to speak its language. On screen, Brandon clicked, dragged, tapped, growing more frantic by the second. The dashboard remained still, its metrics blinking red like a heartbeat in distress. Inventory halted. Billing crashed. Shipment statuses vanished. Behind him, an intern's panicked eyes darted toward the camera. Timer kept ticking, merciless. My phone buzzed once, then again, then relentlessly. Caitlin was the first, then 2 ops managers, then someone from the executive team. Brandon's name appeared 5 times in a row, then 10, then 12. I didn't answer any of them. A voicemail buzzed through next, Brandon's voice sharp and accusatory. "What the hell did you do, Rachel? This is sabotage. You've crossed a line." I still didn't respond. Then another call came. My father. Just seeing his name on the screen made my stomach knot. I let it go to voicemail. His voice, calm but strained, followed a moment later. "Rachel," he said, "I know you're hurt, but this is the family business. If you care at all about what we built, please fix it." What we built. The words echoed inside me like a cold wind slamming an open door. What did we build? He knew the truth. He knew it had been me with the vision, me with the architecture, me with the sleepless nights. Yet even now, when the system was groaning under the weight of their carelessness, he expected me to rush in and fix it without question. I held my phone in both hands, seated on the edge of my bed, frozen between fury and grief. Not for myself, I was used to being overlooked, but for the people who would pay the price for this. The floor managers are watching chaos ripple through the warehouse floors. The finance team is losing sleep over reports they couldn't access. The supply coordinators are answering calls with no solutions. They hadn't fired me. They'd amputated the system's heart and expected it to beat on. I almost canceled my afternoon interview. But something, maybe that same quiet defiance that kept me standing when I was pushed aside, urged me to go. Carval Logistics had always intrigued me. They were lean, ambitious, and transparent. Their reputation was growing fast. Their CTO had recently stepped down, and they were looking for someone not to fill shoes but to design the future. The interview room felt different the moment I stepped in. Clean. Purposeful. Respectful. They didn't grill me. They didn't scoff when I described Core's complexity. Instead, they listened. They asked thoughtful questions about fault tolerance, adaptive systems, and long-term infrastructure planning. They knew my work. They respected it. They respected me. Toward the end, the CEO, an unassuming woman with intelligent eyes, leaned forward. "We'll double your salary," she said. "Offer you full CTO authority. And 5% equity. Not because we want you to replicate what you did. We want you to create something better." For a second, I was stunned. Through years of being talked over, cut off, and left out of the big decisions, I was finally being offered something priceless: belief. I stood slowly, extended my hand, and smiled. "Let's build," I said. The knock came just after 9 that night. I didn't need to check the peephole. I knew it was Brandon. He stood there, disheveled. His tailored image cracked. His suit was wrinkled, his shirt slightly untucked, and deep shadows under his eyes. The ever-present smirk was gone, replaced by something rawer. Humbled. Frightened. "I need your help," he said, voice low. "Please." I stepped aside, letting him in without a word. He stood awkwardly in the center of my living room, scanning the space as if searching for something familiar, something solid. "They're all turning on me," he finally said. "The board. Clients. Even Dad. We lost 3 contracts today alone. Operations are still frozen. There's talk of legal action. The whole company is in panic mode." "And Core?" I asked calmly. "Still locked. No access." I tried everything. He ran a hand through his hair. "Rachel." I screwed up. "I get that now." I didn't flinch. I didn't jump up or offer tea. I just sat on the edge of the couch and waited until the silence made him fidget. "If you want my help," I said, "it won't be a favor. These are my terms." His eyes narrowed. "You want money?" I shook my head. I want what should have been mine all along. A board seat. CTO title. Compensation matches yours. And full technical autonomy. No interference. No shortcuts. No more treating tech like it's just a support function. It is the core. He hesitated, opening his mouth to argue. The board won't. They will, I said, cutting him off. Because they don't have a choice. 'Cause every hour core stays locked, you bleed money, lose trust, and edge closer to collapse. He looked away. He knew I was right. This wasn't about ego anymore. This was about survival. He nodded slowly. Okay. I'll bring it to the board first thing in the morning. You'll bring it tonight, I corrected. Emergency meeting. I want it documented, signed. You'll call them now. He stood up, pulling out his phone without another word. As he dialed, I looked out the window. The street outside was dark and still. The city lights reflected faintly on the glass, a quiet mirror of the moment. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused, grounded. Not because Brandon needed me, but because Core needed me. People holding the company together deserved better than chaos. And I was finally in a position to give it to them. Not behind a curtain, but at the helm. The next morning, I stepped into the Kingline boardroom with my shoulders back and my head high. It was the same room where I had once sat quietly at the far end, offering technical updates when prompted and fading into the background when decisions were made. But not today. A few of the board members looked up with surprise etched across their faces, others with a subtle relief, like they'd been waiting for an adult to finally arrive and take control of a room that had spiraled. No one said it aloud, but I saw it in their eyes. The system's collapse hadn't just exposed Brandon's recklessness, it had reminded everyone of what kept this company running in the first place. This time, I didn't take the far seat. I took the one directly next to the chairman, a quiet declaration that the days of being sidelined were over. Brandon was already seated, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at me as I placed a thick folder on the table and flipped it open. I didn't start with anger. I didn't go in for drama or ego. I laid it out simply. Core didn't crash, I began. It protected itself. The system registered unauthorized foreign code, attempts to overwrite foundational commands without proper authentication. When that happened, a pre-programmed lockdown protocol activated. It wasn't sabotage. It was security. And it worked exactly as designed. There were a few murmurs. Someone scribbled a note. Another board member leaned in, eyes narrowed with interest. I developed those safeguards years ago after a minor warehouse glitch caused cascading errors through 3 departments. From then on, Core was coded with intelligent defense layers, not to protect me, but to protect all of you. Silence settled in as the meaning sank in. This wasn't a system failure, I continued. It was a leadership failure. And I'm not here to say I told you so. I'm here to offer a way forward. That line hit home. People shifted in their chairs. Even the chairman straightened with renewed focus. If this company is going to recover, not just technically, but publicly, we need more than a system reboot. We need to rebuild trust. Trust in the infrastructure. Trust in leadership. Trust that mistakes won't be repeated. I outlined the plan. A step-by-step framework for restoring the system without scrapping progress. A method of integrating select modules from Vortex without compromising Core's integrity. A transition timeline, staff retraining, and system redundancy protocols. Everything Brandon hadn't thought to include. I watched as heads nodded, as questions turned from accusatory to curious. Brandon, to his credit, didn't interrupt. He didn't object. But he didn't contribute either. He stared ahead, jaw tight, fingers tapping lightly on his knee. As the meeting ended, people lingered, offering cautious thanks, asking for follow-ups. I gathered my folder and rose from my seat. But before I turned to go, I paused. By the way, I said, looking directly at Brandon. Next time you want to replace the engine, maybe talk to the engineer first. Then I walked out, not as the quiet woman in the background, but as the architect. No one could afford to ignore it. When I returned to the office that week, I didn't spend time redecorating or rearranging furniture. I rolled up my sleeves, picked up a whiteboard marker, and walked straight into the IT bullpen. The room fell silent as I entered. Some of them looked nervous. Others looked embarrassed. They hadn't sabotaged anything. They had followed orders from someone who didn't understand what he was touching. But the damage had rattled them. I didn't waste time assigning blame. I didn't talk about Brandon. I didn't make it about me. I clicked the cap off the marker and drew a square. This, I said, is the core security checkpoint in our system. Let's walk through why it triggered. They gathered around, unsure at first. But as I walked them through the logic, the sequence checks, the fallback protocols, the internal watchdog modules, curiosity took over. Questions started flowing. Not about what went wrong, but about how they could learn from it. That's what mattered. I didn't want blind loyalty. I wanted understanding. So we rebuilt together. We rolled back to the last stable version. We reviewed all the altered files. We ran simulations. We implemented new alert systems and access safeguards. I gave them context. I gave them ownership. We weren't just restoring a system. We were reestablishing trust. And over the next few days, the signs came one by one. The inventory logs reappeared, clean and complete. The billing system has been updated. The shipment tracking dashboard blinked back to life. Warehouses hummed again. The finance department sent emails saying "thank you" with triple exclamation marks. Even clients who had been close to canceling contracts started walking back their threats. Vortex wasn't discarded entirely. Some of its modules, particularly the customer interface updates, were decent. But they were scaled down. Used as supplements, not replacements. For the first time in years, the system and the people running it were in sync. Something shifted in the halls, too. People began stopping me, not with politeness, but with real engagement. I heard, "We're glad you're back," more times than I could count. The nods in the hallway weren't obligatory. They meant something now. The board members, usually tucked behind quarterly reports, began scheduling one-on-one meetings with me. Not for show. They asked thoughtful questions. About planning. About future-proofing. About where I thought the company could go next. Brandon kept his distance. He was professional in meetings, nodding at appropriate moments, but there was no warmth. No effort to reconnect. And maybe that was fine. Some gaps don't close with time. They just become part of the structure. Familiar but out of reach. The surprise came on a Tuesday. I was sketching out a modular rollout plan on my office glass wall when I heard a knock. I turned to find my father standing in the doorway. He didn't walk in right away. Just stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain, like he was stepping into a room he no longer had authority over. "I watched your presentation to the board," he said after a long pause. "You were exceptional." I waited. Not out of spite, but because I needed to see what else he had to say. He exhaled slowly. "I should have seen it earlier. What you built here, Rachel, it wasn't just a system. It was a vision. And it kept this company alive. I'm proud of you." The words hung in the air. He didn't overstate them. He didn't pile on praise. But from a man who once thought only charm could lead a company, they meant more than I expected. "Thank you," I said softly. He gave a small nod, then turned and left. That moment stayed with me longer than I cared to admit. Later that week, a small envelope landed on my desk. No note. Just embossed cardstock inside. I opened it and pulled out one of the new business cards. Rachel Mercer, Chief Technology Officer, Board Member. I ran my finger across the lettering, the simple title that took over a decade to earn. And not from a promotion, and not from a favor, from surviving, from building, from standing firm when it mattered most. I leaned back in my chair, the soft glow of my monitor casting a calm light across the desk. There was no music swelling in the background, no grand gesture, just the quiet satisfaction of being seen, not for what they needed me to clean up, but for what I had always been, the mind behind the system, and finally the voice at the table.